Okay, hi everybody. Good to see you all in person, and whoever's listening on Zoom or YouTube later. We all appreciate your coming. Today's shir is sponsored Le'ilui Neshama of Binyamin Yisroel ben Shlomo. Again, a boy that we prayed for, and Mr. Hashem, he should have an Aliyot Neshama, and an Aliyot Neshama for Tzvia bat Dovid, Aviyah Adina bat Adam, Yoel ben Avraham, and Gitel bat Avraham. We hope that the learning in the Divrei Torah should give them zechuyot in Gan Eden. The support of Torah is considered to be one of the greatest zechus that can help a person even after they die. In addition, I personally and the whole Yibaneh family wants to extend a bracha and a refuah shlema to all those who are ill, whether it's through COVID or any other medical condition, that all should be healthy, and refuah shlema b'toch shar cholei Yisrael. This is whether you didn't get the vaccine or you got the vaccine, whatever the situation is. And B'ezrat Hashem, those who are healthy should remain healthy, and those who are ill should B'ezrat Hashem have a refuah shlema. So this week we're continuing the saga of Avraham Avinu, and in Bereshis it's always a little hard to pick what to talk about because the themes in the Parsha are so rich and so multifaceted. And we do have to remember one thing about Bereshis. Essentially, Chazal laid down a rule that the Ramban uses with great frequency: Ma'aseh Avos Siman Labanim. And that means what happens to the patriarchs and the matriarchs is a precursor for everything that will happen in the future. And therefore we look at every little incident in the life of the Avot and the Imahot, and it will find its expression both in terms of what happens later in the Torah, and really what happens in the entire future of Am Yisrael until the coming of Mashiach. So for example, the Ramban makes the point in last week's Parsha that when Avraham goes to Mitzrayim for a famine, and he leaves Mitzrayim with great wealth, that actually is a reenactment, or a precursor I should say, of the Jewish people going to Mitzrayim because of a famine, and 210 years later leaving with great wealth. All of that is Ma'aseh Avos Siman Labanim. We're going to read later about Yitzchak digging wells, and the first well gets covered up by the Philistines, and the second well gets covered up by the Philistines. And the wells are given a name. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. The first well is called Esek. The second well is called Sitna. I'll explain this. And the third well was successfully dug and was not filled up, and that was called Rechovot. And the Ramban says that the symbolism of the wells is the Beis HaMikdash, because the Beis HaMikdash is a source of pure, divine Torah and inspiration that's compared to life-giving water. And as we know, the first two temples were destroyed, and it is only the third Beis HaMikdash that will endure. And the Ramban sees a prophetic message even in the names that Yitzchak gave to the wells, because Esek refers to, in that context, a bad business, and that refers to the idolatry that destroyed the first temple. Sitna is the word of hatred, and that refers to the Sinat Chinam that destroyed the second temple. And the third temple is called Rechovot, which is expansiveness, because that refers to the idea that the third temple will not only be bigger than the existing Beit HaMikdash, in fact, Yerushalayim itself, it says, is going to expand until Damascus. Talk about urban sprawl, but it'll be in a positive way, and that's called Rechovot, right? In fact, that's whoever built Rechovot, whatever it was in the 1920s or whatever it was, used this pasuk as the basis of Hashem has given us an expansiveness in the land. So this is an important idea. This is a meta idea. It's not tied to this Parsha in particular. It's really tied to Chumash Bereshis generally, of Masa Avos, Siman Labanim, and it's such an important idea that I think it's kedai to bring it in. The Akedah, the idea that a Jew is willing to even give up the most precious thing in his life for Hashem. That set the template for the Mesirat Nefesh. In fact, people even ask a question. It's so interesting. People ask the question, what's so great? In a way, it's reversing cause and effect. What's so great about Avram Avinu's willingness to give up the life of his son, or Yitzchak's willingness to give up his own life? Jews do that all the time. This is something that's, unfortunately, a commonplace in Am Yisrael. Ad kedei kach that we don't even know why it's so special. But the answer is, you got it in reverse. It's Avram Avinu and Yitzchak, their willingness to do that which was superhuman, spiritually imprinted the Jewish soul with the capacity of Mesirat Nefesh. Again, I'm not sure if a scientist could explain this, because obviously in standard genetic understanding, actions and moral decisions are not imprinted in someone's DNA, right? These are just acquired things. But we do speak, again, it's not necessarily meant to be literally, of kind of a spiritual DNA that we inherit from Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, and Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. I'll include Bilah and Zilpah. It's always a bit of a question. Why do we actually don't have only 4 imahot? We have 6 imahot, because Bilah and Zilpah were also the mothers of 4 tribes. And we believe that Masa Avot Siman Labanim is also a kind of imprinting, that there are certain characteristics that are imprinted. And Mesirat Nefesh, the willingness to give up your life. I think I mentioned before, forgive me for repeating, but I don't remember if I said it in this year or not. The Baal Tanya of Shneur Zalman writes very eloquently and beautifully in the Tanya that imprinted in the soul of a Jew, whether they're religious, not religious, whether they even believe in God, whether they say they believe in God or don't believe in God, there is this innate love and reverence for God that is in their soul. And one does not have to learn it. One only has to access what is already there. And that is why, even if the Yetzer Hara or the animal soul, whatever vocabulary you want to use, kind of fights it and rejects it and doesn't let it come out, in times of great stress, it'll often come out almost involuntarily. And that's why he made the point that even Jews who are very, very far from Torah were willing to give their lives at critical points for Klal Yisrael and for Yiddishkeit. Mesiras Nefesh, again, I think I've mentioned Daniel Pearl. You may remember him. I hope you remember him. He was a reporter of the Wall Street Journal who was killed by Al-Qaeda, and they actually filmed his execution. They took it down. YouTube took it down after a while. Again, but it's interesting. They left it up. They left it up longer than they leave up the anti-vaccination thing. There, they seem to be very, very quick on that one. But Daniel Pearl, they left for a day or so. I'm not taking an opinion of this. I'm just noting an observation. But whatever it would be, and if you remember that Daniel Pearl was asked to renounce Judaism and embrace Islam, and his very last words, right before they slit his throat, was, "I am a Jew." Very, very remarkable that a person who was not connected to the Jewish religion, a person who I believe even intermarried, in his last moment of life, he affirmed that he was a Jew. Talk about what the Gemara says. Yesh kona olamo b'shah achat. A person can acquire the world to come in 1 hour, but 1 hour actually means 1 second. One decision in life can change everything. And he truly died al kiddush Hashem. This is a topic that's not our topic tonight. It's a much broader topic. The notion of dying al kiddush Hashem is a very fascinating idea. We often say that every victim of the Holocaust died al kiddush Hashem. And it's a little hard to understand this, because the normal idea of kiddush Hashem is martyrdom, meaning to say you're given a choice. embrace Christianity and you will live. And you reject Christianity or embrace Islam and you will live. And a person makes a choice and a person says, I am willing to die before I renounce God and the Torah. That's Kiddush Hashem. You're declaring God's holiness and God's greatness. So anyone who dies when they were given a choice, anyone who dies when they were given the choice of rejecting Torah, that's Kiddush Hashem. The problem with the Holocaust is people didn't have a choice. Number one, even if you converted to Christianity or even if you became an atheist, they were still going to kill you. In fact, as you know, there are some people, actually one person in particular, Edith Stein, who became a Carmelite nun before World War II. And she actually became a saint. She was canonized by the Catholic Church because they claimed that she died as a martyr to her Catholic faith. Now, that's logically incoherent because she was not killed because she was a Catholic. She was killed because she was a Jew. But that's simply an example that you didn't have a choice. And of course, many people of the Holocaust were not religious. So, but even those who were religious didn't have a choice. So, it's a complicated question. How would that be Kiddush Hashem? Many still say that because they died as Jews, that's enough. But certainly, if somebody has a choice, like Daniel Pearl or other people, and they say, I am Jewish, that is dying al Kiddush Hashem. And where did we get that capacity? We got that capacity from the Akedah. So when people ask the question, what's so impressive about Avraham? Jews do that all the time. The answer is we got it from Avraham Avinu. So this is the general idea of Maisa Avay Siman Labanim. But the truth of the matter is that it's not just the good side of things. It's not just the Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah. Even from the negative, shadowy figures, we see precursors of what will be happening to Am Yisrael. And here I want to speak a little bit about Yishmael. Now Yishmael was born in last week's Parsha, if you remember. Avram and Sarah came to Eretz Yisrael at, Avram was 75 and Sarah was 65, a 10-year difference between them. Remember too, just to get the family lineage straight, that Sarah is Abraham's niece and Sarah is Lot's sister. Lot and Sarah were born from Haran, who died in the fiery furnace because he was the second guy to go into the furnace, and he only went because Avram was saved, so he did not merit that great miracle. So Avram was 75 and Sarah was 65. They did not have children, so eventually Avram took an Egyptian woman who was actually from the royal house of Egypt, Hagar, and at the age of 86, 11 years after they came to Eretz Yisrael, he had Yishmael. And if you remember, Hagar actually runs away twice from Sarah. She runs away when she's pregnant, and she comes back. Actually, the second time she doesn't run away. The second time when Yishmael is mistreating Yitzchak or teaching him bad things, she is sent away. So the first time she runs away, the second time she is sent away. Now, we can look at Yishmael and just say, well, okay, another bad nation that oppresses us and the like. But you actually see in Midrashim and in Kabbalah that Yishmael is a very, very unique type of nemesis, a very unique and different type of enemy with a lot of power. You know, in the book of Daniel, and certainly Chazal talk about this, the Jewish people are supposed to go through 4 exiles, where there are 4 different kingdoms. There is the exile of Babylonia. This is not counting Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is pre-Galut because we didn't come to the land yet. There is the Galut of Babylonia that was followed by the Galut of Persia, followed by the Galut of Yavan, Greece. And then the Galut of Edom, because Rome is said to be descended from Esav, that is called the Red One. And the Galut of Edom destroyed the Second Temple, and although the Roman Empire is long gone, we are still in the Galut of Edom because, number one, Edom is also connected to the Catholic Church, and Edom is connected to Western civilization via Rome. And the simplest reason is because the havoc that Edom wreaked upon us has not been rectified. So it makes no difference if there's a Roman Empire or there's no Roman Empire. There's still a Churban Beit HaMikdash. Right? So Chazal always seem to say, based on the book of Daniel, that the last Galut is the Galut of Edom. But in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which is a Medrash, the Medrash says there will be one final Galut after Edom. So it's not just 4 Goliot, but it's, I might say 4.1. It's not called a 5th Galut. It's really an appendage to Galut Edom, and that is the Galut of Yishmael. There will be, right before Mashiach, the ascendancy of the power of Yishmael that will wreak greater damage to the Jewish people than any of the other Goliot. And indeed, we've seen this with 9/11, Islamic terrorism, which is really paralyzing not just, hurting not just the Jewish people, but to some degree paralyzing the world in various ways. So a Galut does not have to mean we're physically exiled there. There are very few Jews in Arab countries, Baruch Hashem, although there's a Chabad house in Dubai and the like, I think a kosher restaurant even, and the like, and I'll come back to what that means. But Galut can refer to the power that this force has. And Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says the following: Galut Yishmael is much more dangerous than any other Galut, because Yishmael comes not only with the power of the sword, but with the power of the Spirit. Yishmael has a spiritual power. The other Goliot, Bavel, Paras, Yavan, they come as material forces. So the truth of the matter is, Ruchnius, right, spirituality, will eventually overpower physicality. Hakol Kol Yaakov. The voice of Torah belongs to Yaakov. Yadayim, physical brute force, belongs to Esav. Ultimately, although it may be a difficult process, ultimately the light will banish the darkness. But Yishmael comes with the koach of Ruchniyat. Number one, Yishmael had Brit Milah. Yishmael was blessed by God. Yishmael has the koach of prayer, right? They daven to one God. It's a monotheistic religion. They daven to one God 5 times a day, which we do. Now, granted, their prayer service is relatively short, but we daven 5 times a day only on Yom Kippur. They do a Yom Kippur tefillah every day. It may sound a little crazy, but a religious Muslim is very careful in modesty. Tzniut. What that means is, this is a very difficult idea to understand, and I can't say I fully grasp it. But just like a physicist will say, there is matter and antimatter. And just like, if you remember, for those of you who are old enough to remember pre-digital cameras, old-fashioned cameras with film. Remember Kodak used to be a big Kodak, Polaroid, these were big companies. Now they're totally kaput. They're just non-existent. So you used to have a photographic negative, and when you would develop the negative in that solution, you'd come up with, you'd get your photograph. So too in Ruchniot, in spiritual matters, there is something called dark spiritual energy. And that is, even a Rasha, if they sincerely invoke the name of God and they pray to God, somehow there'll be a certain success in their actions. And that makes Yishmael a very, very dangerous enemy. And you can see this even in the most simple political terms. It used to be when the United States had a Cold War with the Soviet Union. So the way they navigated the Cold War for 30 or 40 or almost 50 years was with the acronym of MAD. MAD was Mutual Assured Destruction. What's the cheshbon of MAD? The idea was that each side had enough of a nuclear capacity that if the other side would strike first, we would be able to totally destroy them. Meaning, the US's protection that the Soviet Union would not nuke us is because they knew they would be destroyed. And, although the US was not going to do this, but the Soviet Union had the same cheshbon. That's why there was an arms race. I have to have enough to wipe you out if you attack me. And that kept an uneasy balance of peace. Now, that is based, though, on people being rational actors, meaning the idea is, I don't want to get wiped out, so I better not wipe you out, although I would like to wipe you out, but I'm not going to do it because I get wiped out. But what if you have a person, or a nation, or a cause, that says, kind of a perverse Mesirat Nefesh, we are so committed to our cause that even if we're wiped out, we're going to go to heaven. We're going to go to the world to come. We're going to go to the 86 virgins or whatever they say that they have up there. I can't forgive the language. So in such a situation, there's no way to stop that enemy, because that enemy is willing to die. That enemy not only is willing to die, but looks at it as martyrdom and looks at it as a great thing. So that is precisely the great danger of Islamic fundamentalism, Islamic fanaticism, because it is based on that you can't deter it. You cannot deter by conventional ways. And although, Baruch Hashem, the Israeli, both the police and the army and the security services and the Mossad and the Shin Bet, Baruch Hashem, have done fantastic jobs. In fact, I've seen reports that say that for every terrorist action that does damage, there were 20 or 25 or 30 that were thwarted. I mean, we don't even realize, number one, Hakaras HaTov to Hashem for all of the things that were stopped before they came, and Hakarat HaTov to the people on the ground, the army, the police, the security apparatus, that have really thwarted many, many, many more attempts than have actually, God forbid, been successful. Occasionally. But what are you going to do? You can't really stop it. I live right Or Samech, and I live near Or Samech in the Shimon HaTzadik area. So we're right on the light rail stop, right? The Shimon HaTzadik light rail stop. So for a while, there was a problem that terrorists were just turning their cars into people waiting at the station. What are you going to do? Take away cars? Somebody decides, I'm just going to turn my car into people waiting at a rail stop. What are you going to do? So in some ways, Yishmael renders us very impotent. Yishmael renders us helpless. Yishmael has a spiritual power that we're not able to defeat by even the best military planning. And in a sense, that's because they have spiritual koach, not just physical might. And as a result, the only way you can defeat Yishmael is by spiritual means, that we have to have a koach that is greater in terms of our Torah, our mitzvot, our Avat Yisrael, and the like. And all of this, it's so amazing, all of this is contained in the Medrash Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer that describes Galut Yishmael as the most dangerous, because they have the zechut of the milah. And in fact, even Yishmael's name, Yishmael, God will listen to their prayers. The power of prayer. Now, I admit it is a hard idea for me to grasp. Why would God listen to the prayers of people who want to destroy his people? That goes back to the paradox of dark spiritual energy, that spiritual energy is a reality, even when it's employed in an evil, improper way. So that's kind of what we need to think about by Yishmael. Now, what's interesting is, we know from Parshas Noach that there are 70 nations. 70 nations that descended from Shem, Cham, and Yafes. Now, that is not counting Esav and Yishmael, because Esav and Yishmael are descended from Avram, right? So these are the 70 nations that, until you get to Avram, and the like. But there's a comment of the Vilna Gaon that says that the 70 nations are divided into two groups. 35 nations come from Yishmael, and 35 nations come from Esav. And the Vilna Gaon goes through the Korbanos of Sukkot, right, where there are 70 bulls connected the nations of the world, and some of the bulls are to counteract the Yishmael nations, and some of the bulls are to counteract the Esav nations. But what does the Vilna Gaon mean? He certainly does not mean that 35 nations are descended from Yishmael, and 35 nations are descended from Esav. That's not true. Esav and Yishmael are both from Shem, right? Semitic. And most of the nations are from Cham and from Yefes. So obviously they're not descended from Esav and Yishmael. So I would suggest that the Vilna Gaon might mean the following idea: that the 70 nations are not descended from Esav and Yishmael, but spiritually, 35 nations get their power from Yishmael, and 35 nations get their power from Esav. So spiritually, they are descended. Now, what is the unique power of Esav and Yishmael? So it might be that the Vilna Gaon is alluding to the idea that as the Jewish people go through the Galut, there will be two types of persecutions that we're going to face. One is the persecution of those who deny God, and they advocate a life of hedonism, materialism, secularism, assimilation. Now, that represents Esav. Esav represents the person or the nation that rejects God. Remember, Esav will say in a few weeks, I am going to die. What do I need the firstborn of serving God? There's no life other than... Now, that itself can take two forms. That could take the form of persecution. Consider Stalinist Russia, in which God was going to be eradicated. Or it could take the form of hedonistic assimilation that you often have in Western countries. But all of that is the Esav. The Esav is the idea of rejecting God. Rejecting God. Whether it'll come in the guise of persecution, Stalinist Russia, or whether it will come in the guise of assimilation. Yishmael is a different type of persecution. That is not a rejection of God, but that is a utilization of God for evil and violent and destructive purposes. And the Vilna Gaon is alluding to the fact that the Jewish people will be buffeted by these two different forces. One is the force that says there is no God, and the other is the force of a fanaticism that will try to use God to inflict harm and create destruction in the world. That's the para Adam, that's the wildness of Yishmael. Yado Bako, what did the angel tell Hagar? Your son will have his hand in everything. V'yad hakol bo, and people will try to attack them, but to no avail. Now, I would go a little further with the Gra and say that these two different forces, the force of Esav, that is hedonism, materialism, assimilation, and rejection of God, and the force of Yishmael, which is using God for immoral and destructive purposes, are not only symbolic of the nations outside of us, but these are forces within our own personalities. Meaning, within us, there is the Esav, and there is the Yishmael. What does that mean? The Esav is the Yetzer Hara that says, don't get up for davening, don't bother to learn, don't take Torah that seriously. Right? That's the Esav within us. The Yishmael within us is the religious fanaticism that can cause us to look down at others who don't have our particular type of Judaism. Now, God forbid, I don't mean to say at all, there's the moral equivalence between a Haredi who demonstrates and an Arab terrorist. God forbid. I'm not at all saying there's a moral equivalence. But at a deep root level, there is a bit of a similarity in which my version of God is the only version that is acceptable. And your version is apicorsis, right? Those to the right of me are fanatics. Those to the left of me are heretics, apicorsim, right? Again, I want to be very, very clear. I am not at all asserting a moral equivalence. Baruch Hashem, even when we have religious Jews who are demonstrating, okay, sometimes they may cross the lines a little bit, but we're not talking about, God forbid, murder or mayhem of that nature. Even when a Jew riots, they do so with a relative amount of dignity and consideration for others. But nevertheless, at the root, there is something of Yishmael in the fanaticism of Sinat Chinam. Okay? So this is an interesting idea that Yishmael and Esav are the precursors of what we will face. Now, I want to mention one final thing. Chazal have a fascinating teaching. This is also Maisa of a Siman Labanim. Actually, this was not my intended topic, so I want to get to my intended topic. But I thought it was an interesting introduction. Right? I even have it on a piece of paper. This was like point one, like supposed to be 5 minutes. But Chazal actually say that Yishmael did tshuva before he died. And that's why it mentions that when Abraham died, Yitzchak and Yishmael participated in his burial, because Yishmael did tshuva. Think about it. This is such a tremendous solace to Abraham, that God really, really, really gave him the whole blessing, that even Yishmael came back. And indeed, when Abraham married Keturah after Sarah died, Chazal say Keturah is Hagar. So Abraham completed the circle. In fact, when it says God blessed Abraham with everything, it's machlokas in the Gemara. What's the everything? What's the extra thing? According to one opinion, he even gave Abraham a daughter. According to another opinion, the bracha was he didn't have a daughter. Again, this is not a misogynistic statement. It just meant that in the ancient world, having a daughter was, a very, very difficult proposition sometimes, because you had to protect her from immoral people, etc. So Chazal was just pointing out, in certain times when women were very, very vulnerable, it was very, very difficult to raise a daughter. But be it as it may, it does say Yishmael did tshuva. So the Meshech Chochmah says that is also Maisa Avay Siman Labanim. That as difficult as the galut of Yishmael is, before Mashiach comes, the Bnei Yishmael, which are the Arab nations, will do tshuva and come to God. Now, Rav Meir Simcha says, interestingly enough, the first step in their tshuva was the religion of Islam. Because, remember, prior to Muhammad, the nomadic Arabs were pagans. So as crazy as Muhammad is, he brought them to monotheism. Of course, if you know the history of Muhammad actually wanted to become Jewish at one point. They didn't accept him. But Muhammad was fascinated with midrashim and rabbinic stories, and he heard it from a lot of the Jewish camel drivers and the like. So the Meshech Chochmah says, converting the nomadic Arab Bedouin tribes to Islam is the first step of their tshuva. It brought them to God. Good thing. The second step, I would add, I think, is things like the Abrahamic Accords. Now again, with the change of U.S. administration, things are not proceeding as quickly as they were, but really I think there is a spiritual significance in nations that were formerly hostile to Israel, beginning to recognize Israel, beginning to recognize Judaism and the right of Jews to worship. And although I am not a Navi and I'm not a messianic predictor of things in any way, but it looks like this is also part of the process of Yishmael Oset Shuva, which is Maseh Avot Siman Labanim. So the point is, all of these are very, very fascinating precursors. We've had already several decades, almost a century, of Arab or Islamic terrorism in various guises, and certainly since 9/11, or even before 9/11, things have gotten worse. But at the same time, and it should continue, things are now getting a little better, or getting better, right? And part of that is the process of Yishmael Osa Tshuva, right? So that also means we're getting closer and closer to the Geula, to the Mashiach, right? So again, they say, in Eretz Yisrael, there's a great fascination. This used to be a Christian thing, more or less, where Christians always try to predict the end of days and everything else. It was not so much of a Jewish thing, although we do have some storm that do it. But I see in Eretz Yisrael, everybody likes to give you predictions and come up with dates. it's interesting. I can go back to blogs that are 5 years old and say Mashiach is coming this year and we have a gematria. Okay, you can go back to a lot of the blogs and see that Hashem decides things on His timetable, which is not necessarily our timetable, and because of that, Chazal discouraged. Chazal did discourage what are called machashvei haketz, which is messianic calculations, but at least in a gross sense, in a general sense, we see different signs that indicate we are approaching a critical stage of Geula, and again should be Ken Yehi Ratzon. Okay, so now I'm going to begin my shir. And I really want to start off with a relatively localized question and share with you a fascinating answer of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. And that is, the Parsha begins, Avram Avinu had his circumcision. In fact, he did it to himself. He was 99 years old. He did a bris milah, obviously both because of his age and because, actually the truth of the matter is, bris milah for any adult is, it can be a very painful procedure. I mean, even if you're 25. In fact, a few years ago, one of the courts in Germany prohibited, it was an Islamic case, it did not involve a Jew, but it was a very dangerous precedent. They prohibited religious circumcision on babies because they said it was a non-medical surgery without the consent of the patient. And therefore they said you have to wait. So somebody should tell that court it's going to hurt a lot more when the kid grows up. better to do it now. And that was a very dangerous, obviously that same logic would be applied to a Jewish circumcision, which is even at a younger age. Baruch Hashem, I think the German Supreme Court overruled it. I sometimes remarked sarcastically that the German compassion for innocent children seems to have gotten a lot stronger than it was in 1933 and 1945. So, Baruch Hashem, they're growing in Rachmanut and the like. But okay. So Avram has this Brit Milah, and we are told that the third day of the Brit Milah, you're especially weak. So Hashem made it very hot that day, so there shouldn't be any travelers on the roads, so Avram won't be waiting to show them hospitality. So Hashem intended that there would be no travelers, so Avram would rest. But Avram is still sitting out in the sun, waiting for somebody. So Nebuch, God has to kind of accommodate him, so he sends him 3 angels in the guise of people, and they tell Avram, next year at this time, when you are 100, and your wife Sarah is 90, there will be a child. Okay, now the truth of the matter is, from Avram's perspective, again, you have to read the Parsha before. This is not the first time he's hearing about this. At the end of Parsha Lech Lecha, right after his bris, he is told, you will have a child from Sarah, your wife, and Hashem even says what his name should be. And he shall be named Yitzchak, which means he shall laugh. Okay. But let's remember that, but let's go back to Vayera, let's go back to the Parsha. So it mentions that Sarah overhears what the angels are saying. She doesn't know they're angels. And it says she's laughing to herself. And she's saying, after I'm worn out and old, will I get a rejuvenation of the flesh? Can I come back to my youth? And then she says, and my husband is too old also. And the angels say to Avram, even though Sarah was thinking this, why is Sarah laughing that she says she's too old to have a kid? So the Gemara remarks, although she did refer to her physical condition, she did not say the word she's too old to have a kid. She said her husband is too old. The Malachim changed what she said for Shalom Bayit, that Avram shouldn't be hurt, etc. Okay, that's a proof that you're allowed to lie for Shalom Bayit. That's actually the halacha and the like. But be it as it may, we find that Sarah is condemned for her laughter, because even though it's her silent laughter, because her silent laughter suggests there's a cynicism or a doubt that this could happen. And the angels are saying, why is she laughing? Hayipole me Hashem davar, is anything beyond the power of God? Now, question 1 is, Ramban raises, Question one is, why shouldn't Sarah laugh? She doesn't know these are angels. She thinks these are three Bedouins who are walking around. Indeed, they were idol worshippers, because that's why Abraham said, wash off the dust on your feet, because they used to worship the dirt, the dust, or whatever it would be. So Sarah's not hearing it from God, at least as far as she knows. She's hearing three people who come out of nowhere who say she's going to have a child. So of course she has the right to scoff at it. So the Ramban says, a very interesting yesod, the Ramban says, if somebody gives you a bracha, even if you think they're a nobody, even if you think that they're not in a position to give you a bracha, always accept it. Because you never know who Hashem has chosen to be the conduit of his blessings. She should have said, Amen, Kain, Yehi Ratzon. They tell a story, although some people tell me the story is not true, so I can't say it's an actual true story, but this is a well-known story in the yeshiva world. Again, that doesn't prove it happened, but here is the story about a man that had a daughter, and the daughter was approaching 30, and she was not married yet. And that's considered to be a very, very old age in Bnei Brak. And the person went to the stipler of Chaim Kanevsky's father as to, what do I do? What bracha can you give me? So the stipler asked him, did you make a kiddush when your daughter was born? And he said, I didn't make a kiddush. That wasn't the minhag so much. He says, that's the problem. You didn't make a kiddush when your daughter was born. Why is that? Because when you make a kiddush, everybody goes over to you and say, may you be zocha to bring your daughter to the chuppah. And then you even get impatient. 100 people, 200 people are telling you the same thing. And one of them may have been the conduit for the divine blessing. You didn't make a kiddush. You didn't have a conduit. So the person said, what do I do now? He says, make a kiddush in honor of your daughter's birth. She's 30 years old. He says, so he listens, he makes a kiddush, and I want to celebrate the birthday of my daughter. And people go over to him and say, may you be zochet to shidduch. And the story goes like 2 weeks after the kiddush, she got engaged. Okay, I don't know if it's true, but it's illustrative of the idea of the notion of conduit. And indeed, Chazal say this, Al tehi birkas hedjot kala b'einecha. A simple person who gives you a blessing. Take it seriously. Take it seriously. Hashem chooses people, we don't really know the process, to be conduits for blessings. Never reject a blessing. That's why Sarah's laughter is condemned. But here's the problem. When Avram is told by Hashem that he's going to have a son, it says he falls on his face and he laughs. So the question is, why is Sarah criticized for her laughter and Avram is given a free pass for his laughter? Now it's fascinating that Targum Onkelos actually gives us an answer, which is quite unusual. Targum Onkelos is the Aramaic translation of the Torah, and Targum Onkelos is a very literal translation, meaning Onkelos tries to be consistent. If two psukim use the same word, Onkelos will use the same Aramaic translation. He does not vary. I mean, whenever he does, you have to try to understand why. But Onkelos' general approach to translation is the same Hebrew word will have the same Aramaic translation, which makes sense. Now here's the problem. One of the few exceptions is that with Avram it says Vayitzchak, which means he laughed. The Targum translates it Vachadi, which means he rejoiced. And with Sarah, which is the same word, except instead of Vayitzchak it says Vatitzchak, which just means she laughed. Gachich, she scoffed. So the Targum takes the same Hebrew word, except for feminine, masculine. And in one case he translates it as joy, and in the other place he translates it as skepticism. Now where does he get that? Presumably he's working backwards. Since Abraham is not criticized and Sarah is criticized, it must be that their laughter was a different type of laughter. You can laugh for two reasons. I can laugh because I am so happy at this blessing of God, or I can laugh because this is the most ridiculous thing I ever heard of. So this is the Targum. Chadi, rejoice, versus gachich. But the Targum is very difficult, because if the laughter of Avram was a different type of laughter than the laughter of Sarah, why does the Torah use the same words? Onkelos gives us a different translation, but the Torah uses the same words. In other words, the message is totally lost if the Torah describes their laughter in the same way. So because of this, the Or HaChaim gives a very different pshat. And let's start with another question. Is this the first time that Sarah is hearing this message? What about the fact, I mean, what happened? Avram had his bris. And at the time of the bris, Hashem told him, you will have a son, this is in Lech Lecha, you will have a son from Sarah, your wife, not just Hagar, from Sarah, your wife, and you will call this son Yitzchak. This is before the angels came. The angels didn't come till day 3 after the circumcision. So let me ask you, did Avram tell his wife about this prophecy? Because if he did, and logic would say that he did, she already knows. In other words, she's not hearing it from the angels for the first time. She already knows. So why is she laughing when she hears it from the angels, right? So the truth of the matter is, Ramban actually says, Avram didn't tell his wife. Because he was sick, he was not feeling well, it slipped his mind, too busy. In other words, she didn't know. Again, it doesn't sound so plausible to me. But you know how it is. Husbands sometimes don't tell their wives important information. At least all the men here have been there, I assume. At least the married men have been there. The unmarried will get there. And the like, and we get in trouble for it. So the Ramban says, Avram says, oh gee, forgot to tell you. Okay, so Sarah's hearing it the first time from the angels. But the Or HaChaim says that's a dochek also. Probably Avram told her. So we got these two problems really. Problem one is, why is Avram's laughter okay and Sarah's laughter is not okay? And number two, why is she skeptical at this point if we assume Avraham already told her, so she's not getting the information from these Bedouins. She got it from Avraham, who heard it from Hashem. So here's what the Or HaChaim says. Certainly, Avraham is laughing out of joy, and he says Sarah is laughing out of joy also. Sarah absolutely believes she's got to have a child. She is not skeptical. And when she says, after I'm old, can I have rejuvenation? She's expressing wonder, not skepticism. And indeed, Chazal say that her body is already changing. In other words, she started menstruating. So her statement, can I be rejuvenated after I've become withered, is actually a statement of wonder and gratitude. So now, we're back to the problem. So why are the angels critical of her? She's expressing happiness and joy. And Avram is expressing happiness and joy. It's the same thing. Here is the difference. Avram laughed as soon as he heard the prophecy of God. Sarah laughed only when she saw the physical changes in her body. So when the angels say, why is Sarah laughing? They actually mean, why is she laughing now? Why didn't she laugh before? What does that mean, the Or HaChaim says? From Avram Avinu's perspective, A divine promise is equivalent to reality. He doesn't need to see anything beyond the divine promise. He laughs, spontaneous laughter. Sarah believed in the divine promise, surely, but it wasn't real to her till she saw empirical evidence in the changing of her body. This is a really new interpretation of the verse. Sarah is not doubting this nevuah. She's reacting with joy. But the angels are saying, why didn't you react with that same joy when Avram told you the prophecy? Because in your mind, lefi your madraga, you believe in the prophecy, but it's not as real to you as what you see with your eyes. For Abraham, God's promise is more real than what he sees with his eyes. And that was the difference in their level of emunah. And the Orach Chaim says, for the one that is ma'amin b'Hashem, God's promises are as real as anything physical that I experience, and maybe even more so. So, lama zeh tzachak hasara, why are you laughing now and you didn't laugh before? Did that imply that God's promise wasn't real enough to you? Okay? And that even explains why Sarah denies laughing. Is she lying? She's not lying. She thinks she's being accused of being a skeptic, and says, I was never skeptical. But that's her misunderstanding of what the angels meant. So she's giving a truthful answer to an erroneous understanding of what their complaint was. They were not complaining that she was a disbeliever. They're complaining that the physical changes mean more to her than the divine promise itself. But in terms of being a skeptic, she was never skeptic. She believed in the nevuah of Avraham, and she believes in what the angels are saying now, because that's just confirming that nevuah. You know, this is reminiscent of a vort of the Chassam Sofer. And I think I said this around Tisha B'Av, but I'll bring it in here as well. There's a statement in the last Mishnah of Maseches Tainis, Kol HaMisabel al Yerushalayim. Anyone who mourns the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Yerushalayim, Zoche v'roeh b'simchata. So we translate this as will merit and experience the joy of the rebuilding of Yerushalayim. That's a well-known statement. But in reality, I just mistranslated that statement. Because Zoche v'roeh is not atid. It does not mean will experience. That would have been yizkeh v'yireh. Zoche v'roeh is hoveh, is present. So literally the statement means, he who mourns over Yerushalayim experiences, merits and experiences the joy. Meaning, while you are mitabel. What does that mean? While I'm mourning, I'm experiencing the joy? I mean, I'm not experiencing the joy when I'm mourning. So here's what the Chassam Sofer says. The Chassam Sofer says, we find that when Yosef was sold, and the brothers went to Yaakov, and they showed him Yosef's many-colored garment being dipped in blood, and they said, a wild animal attacked Yosef, and this is his blood. Yosef is dead. So the pasuk says, Yaakov could not be comforted. And Rashi brings, Yaakov could not be comforted because you can't be comforted when somebody's alive, even though you don't know it. God put into the world the idea that time is a healer of wounds. That if, God forbid, there is a bereavement, although the suffering may never go totally away, but at some point, usually, you're able to move forward. But that's only because the person is dead. If the person's alive, even though you don't know that they're alive, in fact, even if you think they're dead, metaphysically there's a process that you don't heal. So Yaakov couldn't be healed because we're not mekabel tanchumin on someone that's alive, because that's not the process that God put into the world. So the Chassam Sofer says, if I'm a guy and I'm still crying over the destruction of the temple, and it's 1,000 years, and 1,500 years, and 1,600 years, and 700 years, 2,000 years, why don't I get over it? Because the idea of redemption is still alive. Meaning, if redemption would be dead, I would get over it. But because redemption is still alive, I'm not makabel tanchumin. So what that means is, in the very process of my grief, I have simcha. Because I say, if I'm still mourning the Beit HaMikdash, that's because it's alive. It's coming back. And therefore, in my mourning, I'm zoche v'roeh. Now, what that is saying is, to the believing Jew, when I imagine in my mind the prophecies of comfort, the promises of God, even if they have not been manifested yet in reality, the promise of God is every bit as good, if not better, than the reality itself. In fact, the Gemara gives us a story in Maseches Baba Basra, where Rav Yochanan was once teaching his Talmidim, because one of the Nevuos in Yeshayahu talks about the walls of Yerushalayim being made out of diamonds and rubies and jewels. And Rav Yochanan said that Liyasid Lavo, the walls of Yerushalayim, will be high, high walls, which are slabs of jewels, like a slab of diamonds, 100 feet high. So a certain Talmud was sitting in the shir, and he thought to himself, this must be an exaggeration, not true, a baba maisa. So he was on a sea voyage, and the ship got lost at sea for a while. Baruch Hashem, he got back. And he sees floating on the ocean slabs of diamonds. So he says, Rabbi Yochanan was right, I mamish saw this. So when they were saved, he runs back to his Rebbe, he says, you were right, I saw it with my own eyes. Thinking that Rabbi Yochanan would be happy at the confirmation. So Rabbi Yochanan said, until you saw it, you didn't believe it? You only believe it because you saw it? And it mentions that Rabbi Yochanan gave him a look, and he burnt up like a pile of bones. Okay, that's another discussion. This is occasionally a sanction that the Gemara talks about when Talmidim misbehave. And the like, again, whether it's literal or not literal, that's also a machlokas. So that's the reality of emunah. It's not a madrega that, most of us will have most of the time, or any part of the time. But the idea of looking at the world through the lenses of emunah, the reality of Hashem's presence is so palpable that it's more significant than what I see with my eyes. Like someone asked the Kotzker Rebbe, who is renowned for his very short, incisive remarks, that there's a certain Hasidic Rebbe who says that every night of Sukkos, he sees the Ushpizin as they come in. And the Kotzker Rebbe said, I don't need to see them, I believe that they come in, and that's even better. The emunah is the reality of my life. B'ezras Hashem, I hope that in the coming year, all of us, including myself, will try to grow in the idea of emunah, that Hashem runs the world, that even when there are challenges, even when there are difficulties, they are the means, they are the mechanism that God is employing to bring out within us that which would be to make us stronger, to make us better, to make us deeper, to make us more compassionate, to make us more courageous and more resilient. And when you look at the world through eyes of emunah, you see a very, very different world. Instead of looking at a world that is negative and dark, you see a world that is full of challenge, indeed, full of challenge and struggle. But you see it as purposeful, you see it as directive, you see it as meaningful. And then you live your life in accordance with the choices that will bring you to that right place. So B'ezras Hashem, may Tafshin Pei Beis be a year in which we grow in that emunah. Okay, thank you.
Neshamot